Hello, Bill the Artist here with another how to draw video, and today we're doing Ron Weasley. A very young Ron Weasley from year 1 at Hogwarts, like we did Harry Potter from year 1, but Hermione, this was from about year 3 I think, and we're going to do different ages as well. But there is how to draw Harry and how to draw Hermione online, so you can check them out in the playlist, link in the cards and the descriptions, so do check them out, have a go at them. But there is also in the how to draw playlist, we have from Fantastic Beasts, we have Newt Scamander, Gellert Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore, the young Albus Dumbledore. And you've been asking me to do the old Albus Dumbledore, and I will. We will get to him at some point. But I am fitting this art in between my artwork, these how to draw videos. Now, I will just fetch this quickly. This is Peter Hickman, and he won the senior TT. A lot of my main art is in motorcycle racing, and I do fine art prints. So this is Peter Hickman on the Smith's Racing Triumph, and that's my latest drawing. I also do oil painting, so check out the paintings and drawings playlist. And I fit these how to draw videos in between doing my other art, so that's why I kind of get delayed. Anyway, this is gridded up. We have Ron Weasley to do, so let's crack on. And I've done these lines again quite dark. You don't have to do them as dark. I've done them so that you can actually see them to mirror what's on the reference. And I had somebody ask about gridding up a piece of artwork. How would they do it if they wanted to do their own portrait? So again, you've got to set your grid up the same in proportion as the reference that you're using. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing a portrait or whether you're doing some an animal or an object. But if they wanted to do it bigger, so if your grid was, say, 2 centimeters, every 2 centimeters you drew a line, and you did that on your reference, and then you wanted it to double in size, you would then on your paper put the grid at 4 centimeters. If you wanted to triple from 2 centimeters, you do them at 6 centimeters, or if it was inches, 1 inch, you do 2 inches for double, 3 inches for treble. That's how you could work out the proportions. But we are going to crack on. So on the center line at the top, we're just going to put some little reference marks. So where Rupert Grint's outline of his hair as he played Ron Weasley is going to be down here. So on this line we want his ear. Now we can just draw it. I'm going to draw in some shape, so I'm going to put a box here for where his ear is, little rectangle, and that's roughly where that ear is going to go. We've got a triangle. Remember, on how to draw anything I use basic shapes. So there's a little bit of a rectangle there, but we've got this V coming down for his collar, and that comes here where his tie is. So again, his tie, we want a little rectangle for the knot, and then that kind of comes down from there. Another little rectangle, but we've got another V, another triangle shape that's going to go off. So we've got this big V coming down for the right side of his collar, and this one comes down quite far inside that square, whereas this one comes right over inside that line. Now again, I'm just putting these lines in quite quickly. We need a mark for the side of his right cheek. This is just getting the very basic proportions in of Ron Weasley's face shape. And you put the little marks in. It's a bit like a dot to dot then, where everything is going to go. So that little mark there coming down to the side of his face, his cheek coming around to join on that one, and then you've got his chin and there his jawline is going to come up and join on his ear inside here, inside this little rectangle of your grid. Again, it's slightly curved. So hair coming down, we draw that little, extend that rectangle, just like a little oval of his hair coming round inside of his collar. And then his neck line is just curved up to where his ear is. Now his ear inside this rectangle is just nicely curved. I do have a bit of a sniffle, so if I do sniff a bit, then do excuse that. The joys of bugs. Lots of people handing coughs and colds and sneezes and sniffles around as normal in the winter in the UK. I think I may have got this off my dad. Now here we've got this dark patch, so there's a little triangle for that dark patch of hair. Now coming across halfway, we've got another box shape, and that's going to be his hair that's going to curve round. But we want his parting line comes over right over the top. So if we break down where we put those little marks, and then you draw out and connect the outside of his hair, and then we've got this brilliant highlight, and then you can see where that dark shadow line underneath his hair goes. Again, I'm just putting these very, very simple lines and shapes in. So here we've got the right part of his hair coming down over, and there's just a long kind of rectangle shape that comes down, and then you can just curve it for his hair a little bit. And then this comes down to kind of 2/3, third up, and we can curve that outline of his hair, and there you can see you've got a very quick basic outline shape down of Ron Weasley. And now his eye on this side is a little bit under his hair, so like I say, his hair on his fringe comes down, and that's pretty much about halfway. I will just say, if you can hear the wind, it's very windy outside where I'm working right now. They've got 40-mile-an-hour winds. It's about 55 kilometers per hour. Just very, very gusty. So if you can hear the wind, it's just very atmospheric where I am right now, and quite appropriate for Hogwarts Castle, because there's been a lot of wind where they are up in the wilds of Scotland in the Harry Potter books. So now we've got Ron's eye. I'm just going to draw a rectangle in, to kind of place the shape of his eye. And even though it's going to be curved, I've got this very, very simple, gentle rectangle. Now this eye is a little bit higher. You can see where I've put that rectangle, this eye, his right eye, needs to be a little bit higher. So I've put another little rectangle in that is going to give me the placing for all of Rupert's eye. Now again, his nose, I'm going to put a triangle in. So these are just nice simple basic shapes, and then a rectangle, so we've got about a third down where his mouth is. And it's not perfectly horizontal, so we've got a centre line for where the middle of his lips is. So if I just draw a box that will give the top and bottom of the box a rectangle, and we've got the very corners of his mouth, but the end of his mouth is inside. So there we've got a bit of a cubist Ron Weasley, where I've put these just little shapes in for his eyes and his mouth. Now we need the top of his cloak coming off, and these are just like steps coming down. So if we've got the edge of his cloak there, and then we've got from about halfway just simple steps going up. Now off the back we have these curves coming round, and then you've got the shadow and the highlight. So if you follow that, we've got a little triangle there of grey, and then the same here, we've got a triangle that creates that fold in his cloak, and another smaller triangle inside that will create the deep dark shadow. Again, we'll finish that in. So again, you can see very, very lightly I've put in all of these shapes. Now we're going to just start building up the detail for where Rupert's eye is. So we've got the top of his eyelid, and then where his eyelid comes over his eye. So if we do his actual eye, remember that's a bit like an egg. So we've got that coming over to about a third, which is where the inside of this line is. So if you curve the bottom of his eye, and then the top of his eye coming over, it's kind of more acute just coming up over his pupil and his iris, and then it curves over and comes down to his tear duct in the corner of his eye. Now here he's got very dilated pupils, so we want that circle for his dark pupil, and then that goes just over the centre line, and then his iris, and then we can just tighten that line up a little bit because that comes down a little bit closer, and then we've got a very strong highlight here, and so I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to draw the line all the way around. I'm just going to indicate where the highlight starts. And so if we tighten that line down, and then if we do an arc going up to the top, and you can see it's quite a large eyelid over his fold. And that pretty much comes right the way down over to join over the top of where the corner of his eye is, where his tear duct is. And we're just starting to indicate the actual details of the outline of his eye. So if we do the same for his right eye, which is actually a little bit blurred and out of focus in the photo. And this is to do with depth of field on cameras. So we can see here, but when we do the drawing, we can just keep the line sharp, and you'll have the actual detail. So you've got the bottom of his eye, of his right eye, comes across, and it's kind of in line with the bottom of where the highlight will be, kind of in the middle of this eye. And that comes round and then just peeks out and curves up of the side of this reference line. Now we can do the top line, and that's got to come round the tear ducts here. And we draw the line down to where his tear duct is. Now all of the pupil is to this side of the reference line. So you draw a circle for the pupil. Again, his eyes are very dilated, and it goes right the way up to join the top of his eyelid. And then we want the iris, and again on this side we curve it down, and they've got the highlight there, so I'm just going to draw another little circle for the highlight, but you can see the edge. And then the top of his eyelid goes up. It's still going up as it goes to the centre line, and then curves down to outside. Just going to raise that up a little bit. And then edge of the skin. So there we have a couple of eyes in quite quickly. So now we need to pop his nose in, and you can see that's the edge of his nose comes down, and it's in line with his pupil on the right hand side. So we're just going to put a little curve which is like a C, and then we can bring down his laughter line, it goes to the edge of his mouth. But we also now need, coming down from where his tear duct is, we've got his right nostril, coming down to the centre of his nose, and his left nostril. It's a bit like a bird, you know, if you draw a bird flying, you kind of think that big U shape, and then it kind of curves around to where the edge of his left nostril is. Now again, this one is in line with his tear duct of his left eye, and that curves around, so you've got like the front of a D shape, or the bottom of a pear, that kind of curve as it just comes around to form his left nostril. Now you've got a little bit of an oval where the top of his lips are. Again, his actual lips, we're going to draw down, so the edge of the top of his lip is inside the line, and then the very edge of his mouth goes over your reference line, and that point goes down and joins on with the crease coming down his inside of his cheek. Now the the edge of his mouth on this side is kind of in the centre of his pupil on that side. And we can draw that up. Now, the top of his lip is in the centre of his left nostril. So I'm just going to rub out a slightly darker line over the top, and then his bottom lip will curve inside that rectangle, going all the way round, and it comes up and joins so you can see just very quickly using those basic shapes we're getting some detail down. Now we need the creases coming down for creating his cheek, and there's the kind of cheek line coming down over his mouth. Now if we just put some darker lines in to indicate his hair, and then this is just getting us a simple outline detailed up very quickly. So now we want the edge of Ron's head, and you can see how the line, it isn't straightly vertical, it's just slightly angled, and it comes down. You've got a little bit of a kink by the side of his eye coming down to where his cheek is here. So if we draw that line down, and then it just kinks out a little bit, and then starts the curve of his right cheek coming down. We follow the contour line that we put in and the contour of his cheek, and then that curves and just comes in over the top, and then we want to get the curve of his chin underneath where the curve of his mouth is. He's got this kind of little dent. It's not a dimple, but just a little curve underneath his chin from the right to the left hand side, and then the same coming up. We've got the curve coming all the way around to his ear. Now the edge of his hair, we're going to detail that up, and then this comes to the centre line and it curves up over the top and joins down, and at the back again that curves and goes right the way out down to that little fleck of hair, and then this highlighted bit comes out, and we're coming down to his ear, and we've got this triangle of hair that's just above this corner of this reference point. You can see that goes up and then it lines up with the top of this eyelid. I do feel a bit bunged up because of these bugs. Oh, there you go, sniffing a bit more out of the way. And then his hair that comes up and joins under the fringe, and you've got this incredible highlight. And that goes up, and then we've got the dark shadow will just indicate that. So very quickly, like I said, we've just got to get the ear in now. So we've got the edge of his ear that comes down, we've got his earlobe, and that goes across, curves, and then we just follow this kind of egg shape. Start from the top, use the curve of your hand remember, and that will allow you to just draw a curve naturally. Then the inside of his ear, we've got just these little lines, and then we've got this. A lot of this is in shadow, so it's more about your shading in a bit. It'll create the shapes. So you've got just like a little R there and a little boxy C kind of shape there. Just the curve comes down, and the same at the top. And then you've got a little V shadow there, and then that will come down. Like I say, you've got this little knobble inside his ear, and the same with that. But again, this will be your shading to build up his ear. So we now have his neckline coming down to his collar, and you don't have to do your outline as dark as this. I'm just doing this so that you can see it a lot clearer on this video. So now I'm going to come down. His collar actually comes across this line, so I'm going to join up his collar across the top. It curves and gets close to this reference line, and then we've got the point right at the bottom. So coming across, I'll join up those V's, and then you've got two little lines where his shirt goes over. That's the button at the top. Ron actually has his button fastened up. That's quite nice, considering he's normally got his shirt hanging out. And again, the same. We follow that line that we put in, but now just detailing that there's a little bit of a curve. It's not a straight line. So his shirt then goes up and joins on inside his chin, and then that goes up, and you got to imagine it goes round the back of his neck. That's what you've got to think when you're drawing. So now the outside of his cloak, we've got these, and these are very nice and quick lines to draw in. Got a little triangle there which will be that shadow. Then you've got this collar edge coming out. We need a line coming down for the edge of his cloak coming in here. His tie, and we follow the lines that we put in, but this is just curved a little bit as it goes up. And then we just want the diagonal lines putting in for his Gryffindor colours. And his tie, as it is done here, kind of comes out and bends around and follows the line of his shirt and his cloak coming down. So now we want the edge of his hair coming down, follow that curve around, and the same for where the shadow is and the highlight. Go over the outline of the edge of his cloak on the back, where that shadow is going to be, that dark shadow. Again, that V for that shadow there. So now we've got the edge of the top of his cloak and his jacket, and that's the outline, looking quite good already. So now, before I rub out the construction lines, now we've got this basic outline down, I'm just going to go over and just check some of the spaces. So I'm just curving that chin a little bit, and his lip, bottom lip, is a little bit too thick, so I've just thinned that down, and you can rub that out a little bit. And again, this is where you're just using your reference points to clarify some of your details, and then we're going to put in the shapes. And it's like the bottom of his nose. My original construction line was a little bit higher, so if I, there we go, that's a bit better. And the top of this nose, nostril, his left nostril, kind of comes down. But this is how you can just correct as you go along, and this is the whole point with drawing, you can do this and make it work. So now what I'm going to do with the construction lines on is we've got all of these shadow bits that are going in. So I'm drawing a little rectangle there, and we got this kind of rectangle coming down, which is going to be filled with a shadow, and then we've got a rectangle of shadow that's going to come off the side of his nostril because the light's coming from this direction. We've got a kind of curve, like a bit like a what's-it, going up, and then you've got his cheek coming, creating the shadow. Got a bit of a rectangle, again you just curve it a little bit, coming underneath his left eye, and this is where all the shadows are going to be. So we're going to fill this in with shading. So I'm doing this quite lightly, I'm not drawing on with the point, I'm using the side edge of the pencil. Now his chin here, we've got a triangle of shadow that comes down to about the middle of his left nostril, and then if we do a kind of parallelogram that comes down there, we can see that the shadow comes again kind of halfway over to where that chin is, and this is all going to be this darker shadow. And the same going down on his neck, you've got the highlight of his neck coming down underneath there, and we've got the edge of his mouth, we've got a little triangle coming underneath there. Now what we have is a very, very faint eyebrow. I mean, Ron's ginger haired, so from the bottom of his eye to the top of there, you've got the same going up to where his eyebrow is. So you use those as kind of reference points, the distance from the bottom of his eye to the top of his eyelid fold. And then there's another kind of curve line going up and under, and that'll be a very faint shadow. And then we've got the shadow caused by his right fringe of his hair coming down. So again, you've got that kind of triangle that comes down, and then you've got a shadow coming around the edge of his eye. Now that goes up, we've got a bit of a triangle there, and again the shape of his head is forming that. Now his hairline that's coming down, we need to just bring that line down a little bit, and we can just rub that out a little, and we can increase again a little bit more of the detail. So now I'm going to rub out the construction lines from inside Ron's face. Again, you don't have to put the construction lines on as dark as I have, and it will make it far easier for you to rub them out afterwards. Now you can rub out a softer line much easier than you can these darker ones. So I'm really pressing on hard to get these lines off, and there will be some, and I am, because they're on so hard, I am losing little bits of my drawing, so I've had to rub out part of Ron's ear, I've lost a bit of his eye there, but this is just so that you can see the technique. So don't put your construction lines on as dark as I have, and it makes the removal of them a whole lot easier. So oh, excuse me, there's the top of his eye again. I really do have some bugs. I'm so sorry. We've got the edge of that eye. Now, I'm going to put that one back. Oh, we've lost his nostril here, so I'm going to put that back in. And I did lose loads of his ear. So if we pop that on, so now I'm going to do the curve underneath there of Ron's lower part of his eye. We lost where that shadow comes to, and I need to just thicken that out a little bit. So there we have, and you can see I've left the construction lines like having all the others on the outside. I'm now going to just sharpen my pencil a little. Again, I use a rotary sharpener. I have been thinking about getting a battery powered sharpener, but it's just something I've used for years. So, and you can see that in How to Draw Anything parts 1 and 2. I show all of the gear that I've got. Now we need to put in some tone quite quickly. Now we've got all of these shapes, but I'm just going to whack in, and remember I'm using a 2B pencil. That's what I use most of the time. For the very darks I use a 4B. And again, the harder you press on, the darker you get. So here I'm following the contour of his eye, so that's coming over, and you got this little shadow coming down the side of his nose where we've put in those construction lines, coming right the way down. Over his nostril. And his nose creates the shadow coming down over this side, a bit darker. Just underneath his nostril for now. Then we've got a little dimple above the top of his lip, going over his lip. And then the shadow coming down off his chin. Off the bottom lip over the top of his chin, and then to the bottom of his chin, coming right the way down. And then now we've got his cheek. So I'm going to bring that all the way down. Stay within the lines, and then we just need to bring that up. And I'm doing it quite lightly, and then underneath his eye, coming up to the edge of his nose. All of his ear is in shadow. And again, his neck is quite in shadow down here. You see straight away you've now got a lot of form starting to show, three-dimensionality, just by putting this one shadow line down. Now we need a bit of shadow on the inside of this eye. Again, the curve going over. Shadow caused by his hair on the top of his forehead. And then we've got the shadow caused underneath his right eye by that fold of underneath his eye socket. Again, the longer you spend doing this, the more detail you can actually put in. So I've just whacked that in quite quickly. it's a bit of a kind of a mid-tone, and we can build on that the more that we go. Now there's a great highlight on the edge of his collar, so I'm going to try and leave that as much as I can. I'm going to put the tone in all the way down his collar. There's a triangle of light there, so we won't go over that. And you use your putty rubber, putty eraser as well. That's a drawing tool. It's much darker. Well, we've got a couple of folds here inside his tie, and then a bit of the Gryffindor stripe, and then his shirt's folded. But if you use the edge of your pencil rather than the point, you get much better spread of tone, and you can press on lightly and just fill in large areas, and then you build up, and you can build up as quick as you like or as slow as you want to, and that way you add more darks and you can build up the intensity of the darkness. So you can see obviously here there's more of a shadow, so I'm just showing you quickly, just indicating a bit more darker tone. Again, coming down his left cheek, and I'm just going over it again and just pressing on a little bit harder, again with the side of the pencil. The side of his chin, coming down, side of your neck. And the thing with young children is they've got very, very, very smooth skin, unlike adults who get lots of wrinkles. So when we get to do the older Dumbledore and Hagrid and Professor McGonagall and people like that, they've got their wrinkles kind of make it a bit easier, whereas with children they've got smooth skin, so you've got to smooth everything nice and gently. Now again, these shadows in his ear are much darker, and we've got a slightly darker line coming down there. Again, I'm just going to increase this on his neck. Now I'm just going to use a bit of kitchen roll to smooth all this out, a bit darker in intensity inside his top of his nose where it joins his eye, and again the same, this bottom part of his left nostril, and just yeah, the ting, that was my computer telling me I have a message. Thought I'd switch the speaker off, but I hadn't. And the wind seems to have died down a bit. So now I'm going to do Ron's hair. Now I always say when you do hair, pretend you're brushing, go in the same direction. Now you can, because you're just filling in basic tone, you could do it that way, but it does really help. So I'm gently indicating, and you've got a really nice highlight, the tone there. So his hair comes over here on this side. But if you actually draw your lines in the direction of the hair, it just makes it more realistic. And you can indicate as much or as little as you want. And again, the more hours you spend, the more detailed you can be. Whereas I'm just trying to give you guys the techniques. So there's the darkest shadow for where his parting is. bit of a highlight. And then it goes really dark here. So I'm pressing on a bit darker. Now again, I'll go over this with a 4B because that's a much darker pencil. But you can do a much quicker sketch just with a 2B. So there you can see more tone and shape starting to form, and the darkness in his hair is more than on his skin. So this gives you a good idea of what the tones that you need to increase, and then where you can lighten. Again, the shadow coming right down underneath his ear is darker. Again, I need to go much darker on this. Now I'm not going to fill in excuse me, I'm not going to fill in his cloak just yet because that'll be very black, and I will start using a piece of paper to rest my hand on soon because I don't want to smudge, and that's what happens. You end up smudging a lot of your work. So now you can use your finger if you want, but I'm just going to use a bit of folded up kitchen roll, and I'm just going to smooth. Looks like I dropped my pencil, so I'm just rubbing that out on Ron's cheek there. So anyway, I'm just now pushing, smoothing the tone a lot of this shadow. And that's the other thing, when you smudge and smooth stuff like this, it really does help with soft skin. I'm pushing that line light over, smudging all the ear out, and then his chin, down the side of his neck, and it just looks more like soft skin when you just smudge it a little bit. Now that's getting quite dirty, so I'm going to just refold it to smooth this out so that I haven't got as much pencil on there. Now the bonus is when you do this, you actually take some of the pencil and you move it around and you fill in the lighter areas rather than using pencil all the time. So that's a real bonus as well. So you can fill in all that area of his cheek just by smudging the pencil that you've got already there over and across, but just press on very lightly. Now again, it's experimenting, so you can just do this on a piece of paper with tone. Just experiment making shade and tone. So now I'm going to push that up. I need to tone in his lips. Again, the inside of his eye. Bottom part of his eye. But again, try and leave the paper white where the highlights are. So now do his collar. Just smudge that down underneath his shirt, his tie. And again, I'm just smooth this. You can just leave very sketchy lines if you want, but I'm doing this to try and match the others. So now, because I've got so much pencil, I'm just going to put a piece of pencil on, piece of paper on, and I've got quite a point on that because of the side, and we're going to start detailing up Ron's eyes. So I can use the point, and that'll give me a nice crisp line for his pupil. And his pupil is very large and dilated. So that needs to go right the way up to this line that's the top of his eyelid, coming onto the top of his eyeball. So that curves up and then drops down over his tear duct. And then his tear duct is like a little triangle in that corner, and then you want to follow the curve, not pressing on as hard for the underneath part. And his pupil kind of joins the top of his eyelid, but it's above the bottom. It doesn't join the bottom eyelid line. And you can really press on hard to fill that in. You've got a dark line for the outer of his iris there. And then slightly darker coming down. Dark edge of his iris on this side. Very lightly filling that in, but then it's darker coming underneath here up to the highlight. Now the top of his highlight is darker going up to the top, and then he's got a bit of a line in the middle on this side, but you can see there's a nice kind of highlight in that corner. Now right in the corner of his eye is very dark coming out. And then it's a darker line coming over, and then the shadow around the outside will really intensify and build up the clarity of Ron's eye. But you can see already that just adding that dark line makes it so much more pronounced. We need to darken in the corner of his eye, and then you got slightly darker. Again, you can use pressing on very lightly here. The 2B, or you can use something like a 2H. Normally I'll use a 2H. Now I'm going to just dab where that highlight is with the eraser. And again, the top of his lower eyelid and the top of his upper eyelid. And you can see it just starts to really lift Ron's eye out because you're putting intense darks and highlights. We need to really darken down all of the shadow around his eye. So I'm just indicating some in quickly. And that's already starting to delineate his eye out a little bit more. So if we do the same on this side, on his eye, on his right eye, we start with the pupil. Very dilated and joins the top of his eyelid, but again it's just above the bottom line. I'm going to fill all that in nice and dark. Again, I'm just using the 2B. You can use the 4B if you want, because it's much darker. I'm going to increase the darkness of the line coming over, going down into corner of his eye where his tear duct is. You've got a darker shadow in there. And the same with the eyebrow crease above the top. Again, you've got dark outer of his iris, and it's lighter on this inside. But the top of his eye will cause a bit of a shadow there, and then you just want a little line inside to darken that up. Then the top of his eye up here is darker, coming down to the highlight, and then kind of inside of his skin on that corner, and then you've got the underneath of his eye creating that shadow. Now we need to really tighten up the point on that upper eyelid, the angle, really pull it down to where the eye is, and then if we just slightly darken underneath his eye, there we've got Ron's eyes starting to come together, giving us a little bit of detail. Just going to indicate his eyebrow and that shadow caused by his hair coming down his forehead a little bit more. Smooth that out and just take a little bit off. Now again, I'm just going to pull up the highlight on his pupil and the top of that eye, and then we can start building up some of the other work as well, and we'll start on his nose and his mouth next. And so now we're going to detail up Ron's nostrils. So we want a darker shadow underneath the left nostril. Again, just follow the curve and come back, and then you got the line coming underneath there. It's a bit like an S, just like bent over, you know, just follow those curves. And we'll increase the shadow coming down here in a bit. Now again, his right nostril, you've got that great big dark there, and then we need to put the shadow underneath, going round. Now I'm going to increase the curve on the top of that just to accentuate it a little bit more. Now we need to do his lips. Now again, he's got much darker from the left hand side of his mouth, coming all the way round to the right. Now the top of his lips do seem to be a similar height, so just erase the top of that line off a little bit and then just smudged it with the kitchen roll. And we need to bring the dark of the shadow on that side, and you can see there's a highlight in there, so halfway point, draw the lips, the line of the shadow down and then leave that highlight going. Now again, you could just use cross hatching for your detail if you want, but I do smudge all of my kind of art. And if you look on the portraits time lapses where I do the full portraits that take a day, 2 days, that kind of thing, then they are smoothed out much more. But I will be using the smudging stick, smudging stump, in a bit to finish everything off. Now again, he's got the full highlight on his lips, just on that side. Again, on his bottom lip now, we need that comes out and just curves under. Again, the light's from this side, so halfway, just past halfway, all of this is in shadow. Again, your lips have got lines on, so I'm going up and down very gently with the pencil to recreate the direction of the creases in Ron's lips, and you do that the same for anybody. So here we've got his lip coming around, and there's a lot more highlight, so I'm just indicating the creases and little like kind of crack lines in his lips. And you can see the tone is a bit brighter than it is on this side. Again, we can darken all that down in a moment. So now we want the edge of his left nostril. You can see that's in line where the shadow comes out with his left eye, and that's the much darker point. Real deep dark shadow caused by the crease of his nostril right next to the skin. Now again, I'm now just increasing the shadow that's caused by the direction of his nose. So the light's coming from this way. You can see I'm increasing the shadow there. And then you've got the crease above his lips, between the top of his lips and his nose. And there's a highlight there, so I'm increasing now the shadow coming off. So we've got darker shadow here above the corner of his mouth, and then the same off his bottom lip. And I'm just going over, pressing on lightly. I'm now going to indicate the crease line going up to his nostril, the side of his nose. And we need to increase the shadow on the side of his nose there, and then coming to the top of that crease of his side of his nose with the edge of his nostril. I can darken that down a little bit, but you get these like reflected highlights. So you can see there the edge where his nostril is to the side of his nose, there's a reflected highlight and the shadow's a little bit darker right in that corner. Again, the same up here, we've got a very deep shadow right in the corner of his nose where his eye is, and that goes up, and I'm still using the 2B pencil. So the edge of his nose going up to his eyebrow and his eye socket is creating that shape and that shadow. And we've got that darker shadow coming down to join this one. And then the same there. You can see Ron really starting to take form and shape now. But as you're laying this pencil down, again, when I use the kitchen roll, and I'll use the smudging stick in a bit, that allows you to pick up tone that you've already put down on the paper and smooth it around. Now he's got quite light blonde eyelashes, So I'm just indicating very lightly some little lines for his eyelashes. We need to indicate that underneath part of his eye. And I'll really pull the highlight off using the putty rubber. We need to darken that part of his eye down and round that side. Again, over the top of the crease it's a bit darker, and just on the top of his eyelid the same. And this is how you build the drawing up. You just work on the tones, moving around from area to area. So that's a bit lighter going into that corner. You need underneath the crease of that eyelid. And it's his eyelashes that create the highlights on there. So I've filled that in. And now I'm just going to take off some of the pencil using the putty rubber, and that'll give me the highlights where, right in the corners, are created by his eyelashes. I'm going to curve that up a little bit, darken that bit right underneath, the same right in the corner. But the highlights just give that little bit of form again. And right into the corner. And Ron's eyes are really starting to look more real and human. And it's as you increase the dark and the tone that it really starts to pull everything out. Now all down this side of his cheek needs to be this kind of depth of tone. So I'm going to really indicate a darker line so I don't lose the edge of his hair. And the same going up. Again, I'm using the side of the pencil because it's just a broader, still 2B mark that you can make, and you can fill in a larger area. So when I fill in this area in a moment, I won't lose the edge of his hair because it was a similar kind of tone. So now I'm going to fill in this little kind of rectangular shape in his ear. Then you've got the top going over that knobble in the corner part of his ear. And again the same here, we've got that crease line inside his earlobe. And then coming down to the very bottom of his earlobe, got a darker shadow, so that needs to be darker coming off. And again, it's just the crevices in his ear that create the deeper shadows, and you can just build those up. Again, right under the hairline at the top of his ear is going to be, got all that highlighted hair there. We can pull that pencil off in a moment, so we just need to increase that shadow. And the fold in the corner of his ear, so we've got right to the edge of his ear, you've got a darker shadow line. And then we want these little shapes on the middle part of his ear. shadow at the top again. Now again, that's going to be much darker, so I'm just going to fill that in a little bit more. And we'll use the smudging tool to push all that round in a bit. But straight away you can see his ears now got more shape and definition. Again, the same with the edge of his neck. And now I'm going to use the side of the pencil and really darken down all the way over. So we've got that highlight here. So I won't go over that, I'll just kind of go up to it. We've got a highlight on his cheek here as well. But you can see how we're darkening down all of the side of his face, and the highlight is giving that three-dimensional form now. And remember, just be careful, because if you press on too much you will darken down too much of an area, and it's harder to remove than it is to add. So now here we've got this shadow line coming down off the corner of where his cheek is, underneath his chin, and then that comes all the way down, and there's a very, very, very slight highlight going up the left side of his jaw line. We need to bring that shadow all the way down. Again, increase the shadow now going up to his nose. Again, if you're right-handed, you will have your lines going pretty much the opposite way, but this is why I use the smudging, because you can kind of smooth that out. Now his neck, it's darker in this little section here, that's the darkest point, but then his jaw creates a kind of diagonal line coming down. His actual jaw here is darker still than this part of his cheek. So I'm just going over again and adding more and more just to build it up. So that's really coming together and starting to look like our Ron. And he was a real good friend and character to Harry, wasn't he? It's great how they work together in the stories. So now I need to increase a little bit of the shadow there. Again, just not pressing on anywhere near as hard as I was when I was putting this darker tone in. Shadow inside that collar. Now coming down underneath his chin. Right off the centre underneath his lips. Just a little bit of tone coming down the side of his face. And then underneath this right cheek. And we need the top of his nose, there's a little bit coming down to the side of his right nostril. Again, his eye socket coming underneath. and then the top of his eye socket going up to his eyebrow. There you can see the shape and form of all of Ron's face and cheek and eye sockets and nose all coming together, and it's just by adding little bits of tone. A bit in between his nose has a little bit of tone on as well. And this is where, using cross-hatching, you can just build up a drawing, and you could leave it with just the cross-hatching. That is totally acceptable. Now here we have a little kind of, it's not a full brown mole, but it's got a little shape in his cheek. So I've just put a little bit of shadow, and we can pull that back in a bit, and then you just take the pencil off for the highlight, and that's how we'll make that. You'll see that detail come out a little bit more, but I've just put in, you can see a little mark there, just put in a little shape, a little circular shape on the right for the shadow created by that little lumpy bit of skin on his cheek. Now I'm going to use this smudging tool, and again I'm using the side, I'm not using the point, to smudge a large area of what I've just put down. So now I'm pressing on gently, smoothing this in, where the transition from the dark to the light needs to be a little bit more controlled. And going up to his cheek. Again, I'm going in the same direction as I put my pencil lines down. It kind of works in with the contours of the lines that you've created. Whereas if you work the other way, you're kind of doing a cross-hatching technique even with your shading. So it just depends what you're after, but when you're doing the gentle transitions, I kind of find it better to go in the same direction as the way that you do your normal pencil lines. Whereas in all this dark area, you can just smudge it down, and because you're just smoothing a full area together, that's not so critical. And there you've got a really good amount of tone, showing the shadow on the side of Ron's face. So now, up in at the corner of his nose, I'm pushing that shadow line up, and it kind of increases it coming down the bridge of his nose, the side of his nose to his nostril. And I'm being careful not to obliterate that little highlight that's underneath the corner of his nose. And then the real dark shadow coming round. And under his nose. And we will increase that a little bit in a moment. And again, I'm just pushing the pencil around that I've already laid down. Again, this crease line has a shadow and a highlight on it, and we'll pick the highlight out on this side in a bit using the putty rubber. Again, the top of his mouth coming up, and then we've got this bit inside his nose. I'm just going to wipe off a lot of the pencil that I've picked up using a piece of kitchen towel, and then very lightly I'm smoothing the shadow down on the crease side on this side of his mouth. Again on the top of his lips, and on this side that's darker. And this is how you just work around the drawing. You know, you could be working on the bottom part of his chin, but you just take a little bit at a time, keep checking your reference, and build up the tone as you go round. So here we got a bit of shadow underneath. Now got the shadow on the side of his nose going up into the socket. So this side of his eye is in shadow with the lights on this side, so we can see how I've just increased the intensity of the shadow a little bit. And then we need to pull that down a little bit. Again, the same on his nose down the top, and to the bridge of his nose and the point of his nose. That's Ron looking pretty groovy. And the shadow, now his face, a lot of this will come together when we put the darkening of his hair, and again the same with his cloak. But this all, at the moment you're seeing this face and it just looks quite bright, and it's because there's no dark around the top of his hair. So we need to accentuate that in a bit. So these are the shadow coming down caused by the hair off his fringe. And then this cheek, just very gently increasing the tone. There's the part going underneath his eye socket. So you've still got the highlight here. Oh, that's rain. It's just started raining. So the wind's died down now, but now we have rain. So I might be competing against rain. If it hails, that'll be even louder. So I'm going to fill in the tone in between his eyebrows. Same there. So now that's, I'm just dabbing to take off some of the pencil. Because it's not that dark in the corner of that eye. And then going up and over. Same on this side. We need a highlight coming down here and on the top of that fold underneath his eye, bottom eyelid, and a highlight inside the crease above his top of his eye, and then over his eye, eyelid at the top where his eyelashes are, and the same for the bottom. So that's just pulled up Ron's eyes that little bit more. So now if we just smooth the tone down, coming down on his chin, coming across the bottom. Of his jawline, down to the side of his mouth, underneath the bottom of his mouth. Again, increase the shadow in those crease lines. Again, I'm just using the smudging tool as a drawing implement. So now I'm pushing that up along the line of his jaw. And finishing in that tone on his neck. Coming underneath right to the collar, and that bit right next to the collar needs to be a bit darker as well. And again the same right in this corner. And we need to really smudge out the inside of his ear. Where all the creases and folds are created by the shape of his inside of his earlobe and various parts. Okay, so now we're going to darken in some of Ron's hair. So this section down here needs to be really dark. I'm using the 4B pencil now. And it's got a little bit shorter, so it's in this pencil extender that you can get, and you get them from art stores or online quite easily. So when they get too small for you to actually hold, you can use this kind of pencil extender, and it really helps. So now I'm, as you can see, filling in this dark quite quickly. And then down underneath his left earlobe, down his neck into his collar, over the top of the collar. Again, I'm doing this nice and quickly, but going in the direction of the hair. Remember that, always go in the direction of the hair as if you're actually brushing the hair, and it just looks more natural. So here we've got much darker parts going up into his hair, the fringe coming over. We've got to fill all of this kind of hair space in. You've got much darker part there. Now again, the same going up. Now I'm pressing on, not as strong, still using the side of the pencil, coming down from his parting across the front of his forehead. Got a highlight there, so I'm just going to leave that little bit there, but we'll pull that out with the putty rubber in a bit. So again, we now want his hair coming down, and it's quite light on this side, and we'll use the smudging tool to pull that over. But again, I'm just doing this nice and quickly. We've got all this incredible bright highlight here, but we have little bits of hair coming down, so as it's not just a full bright open space. Again, here we've got hair coming over and right to the top, and it's not a full solid highlight, so we can actually fill that in with some pencil line, and the same on this side. So I'm just drawing some lines in. Now again, I've got this smudging tool, it's already got a load of pencil on it, and again I'm going in the direction of his hair. You can see that's really started to just push the tone around a little bit. I'm using the end just lightly brush, literally brush as if you're brushing. And that's something for smudging and smoothing. You can actually use a brush. Different kinds of paint brushes. You can get soft sables and they will give you really nice soft tones, but you can use like centimetre to 2 centimetre wide if you're doing full areas. Hogs might be a bit too bristly, but again you can use a brush to smudge, but I've used those for very soft transitions on ladies' skin. So on this kind of soft portrait you can use a brush if you wanted very soft transitions in light areas. Again, that's on, if you check out a painting in the portraits playlist, a drawing of Jenna Coleman. She was Clara Oswald in the Doctor Who series on BBC, and she's also the young Victoria. Not young Victoria, she played Victoria on an ITV drama, as well as other dramas and other television programmes. A very talented British actress. And on her portrait you can see there's a time lapse, and you can see that I used a brush on that because there were very soft transitions in the flesh. So here now I'm pushing that hair over where that highlight is, and the same here. And because this is the brightest point on this side, I don't mind actually going right the way up and covering all of the paper, because they're not absolutely solid bright highlights. So again, we're now going up, he's parting up to the back of his head, and you can see it's a bit blurred, so it doesn't matter that it's in the reference photo, so you can push the pencil around and it being a little bit blurred, so you can see there needs to be a bit darker here. We can just add some more detail lines, but already that's looking like a fuller head of hair for our Ron. Again, I'm just doing this really quickly. We've done more than about an hour and a half so far, and for a full portrait this is pretty good going. So here we've got a shadow as his hair curves under, and we can increase that shadow line coming down over his eyebrow, and that comes down and joins the side of his eye, down the side of his head, and then we want the edge of his hair and lightly fill that tone in, so you can see there's still that lighter bit going up, and we need to just highlight a little bit, but we'll come over here and smudge this bit around, up behind his ear, left earlobe, coming right the way down, and dark goes right to his neck. So that Ron already is starting to take much greater form because you're increasing the darks now. We've got greater dark tones for our Ron. So now I'm going to take putty rubber, I'm just pinching it a bit. I'm going to pull out some highlights. So I'm going to start on the brightest point. Again, going in the direction of the hair. And right up to the top of his head, and where there's lots of pencil you will obviously not get it right back to the bare paper, but you can pull some off, and you can see already if we come over to the top of his head there's a a bit of a highlight in there, coming over to the back and then right down at the back, and then that goes up to the centre, and then we need coming down over the front of his forehead. We can pull up these little bits, and you've got the strongest highlight here. So there you can see Ron's lighter part of his hair going up just underneath his parting, and we need to bring some little highlights down of his fringe over his left eye, and you keep pinching the rubber because one, you need to keep a sharper point on it as possible, but as it picks up, it goes black. As it picks up the pencil, it renders it incapable of picking up any more, so that's why you have to keep just folding it up and over. So now back on where the strong highlights are. As we just pull that out a little bit. Over the top and the back of his head. And now there's a very strong highlight going up the edge of his ear, and then coming down right on the back of his hair behind his left ear and the back part of the left side of his neck. And so this bit underneath, we've got his hair illuminated, so we can pull out quite a lot of that. So now as we go on the right hand side of his hair that comes down, again I've pulled it very, very tight, nice sharp point, and I'm just pulling up the highlights of the light coming up, and it needs to come right up above the line of where that shadow is. And we can bring that down right to the edge. Now you can see the highlight is giving more form to the right hand side of Ron's head and portrait. And now we're going to go back in. I'm going to go back in with a just drop my paper. There you go. Just pick that up off the floor. That's where I'll be using that in a moment when I start doing the work down on Ron's collar. I'm going to use a 2B pencil and go back in and put some more detailed lines in. I'm just pulling up more highlight lines, as many as I can, before we go back in. And his hair kind of goes over his parting a little bit, and then right at the back, and the same over there. Where is my 2B pencil? Aha, there it is. So now I'm going to use the sharper point. I've got my paper so as I don't smudge. I'm going to indicate more of Ron's hair, but nice fine lines coming down this highlighted part just over the break in between his parting. Now I'm doing this really quickly, and if you go very, very slowly and take your time, can really build up very realistic looking hair. And again, the more highlights that you leave, if you do it very slowly, and you can do very, very, very realistic hair. So now I keep turning the pencil to keep the line as sharp as possible, because with it being 2B, it's quite soft, it will go blunt very quickly. So if you don't keep turning the pencil, it will become a much thicker line, and at some point you're going to have to decide, right, I am now going to have to sharpen this pencil to get a sharper point back on. Now you can use a technical pencil and it keeps the lead at the same thickness, and you can get them in 0.3, 0.5, 0.7 and some other thicknesses. But I'm doing this sketch just using normal pencils so that you can see what you can do with those without having to go and get lots of different bits of kit. But I do use, and you'll see them in my motorcycle drawings, I do use technical pencils because it means I've got a controlled line. See, that's getting a bit too quick fat now. So I'm now going to sharpen my pencil. Back to getting a bit more of a point on. And you can do this, as I was saying, I use the technical pencil on my motorcycle drawings. I've got the paper on there, but my hand is right over the middle of Ron's face. So rather than pushing the paper down, I've got my right hand here, and I'm actually resting my wrist and forearm on my hand on top of the paper, so as I'm not smudging, but it just means I've got fluidity of movement, but I'm not smudging the drawing underneath. So that's something for you to consider. You know, learning little techniques like this can help you as you are drawing. It's just things that, like now, I do automatically after drawing and painting for over 40 years. But it's just little tips and tricks like that that you learn through experimenting, and you might find your own, something that works very, very comfortably for you. And that's the beauty of art. You can create as much as you like and find your own techniques. You don't have to slavishly copy somebody else's. So here we're going and bringing some delineation lines in this highlight, but very light. Again, I'm still turning the pencil. Now for very light highlights in this part, you could, I mean, I am very gently touching the paper, but you could use a 2H or even a 6H. Again, I said earlier, with using a brush for light transitions on female skin, or you know, the light transitions on anyone's skin, if you want to, you could use a brush for smudging. You could use a 6H pencil, and it's barely putting any pencil down, it seems, on the actual paper, but it's just very, very light because it's a 6 hard pencil, whereas B is soft. You can put nice gentle lines down and then smooth them out with a brush or some kind of smudging tool. So now we've got a darker shadow here behind Ron's ear, and you've got right at the edge of his earlobe, you've got a dark shadow coming down next to that highlight. And I'm using the point of the pencil very carefully. Now I need to increase the dark, so even though I use the 4B for the hair, I can use this 2B to put in those hairlines. And then we've got the dark in Ron's ear. And the 2B is quite versatile, so you can go quite dark by pressing on. And I really like pressing on with pencil. And I like the shine that you get in the dark areas where you've really pressed on. I don't go for a matte finish. Again, as I was saying not so long ago, it's down to personal taste. It's technique that you can use and utilise. Now you could use an 8B, and these Staedtler pencils, they do a 9B as well, which is even darker. But even with those, I still like really pressing on and scrubbing the paper hard to generate very dark passages. And I just like the marks on the paper. So that's something for you to consider. So here we've got Ron's ear. We need to increase the shadow coming down to his jawline. And going up to his hair, and his hair comes to a really strong V. We can increase the shadow on his earlobe. So now I'm coming back up over his fringe. Turning the pencil to keep the line sharp. And you can just keep building up and building up the lines and make it as detailed or as loose as you want. I'm going for a bit of a midpoint. So now we need that hair at the back. We've got some hair just straggling over the top. Ron's quite an unkempt fellow, isn't he? Oh, now we need behind this ear as well. So we've got this darker shadow. We want to increase the lines of the hair coming down underneath this ear into the highlighted part. And that comes down right over onto his collar and his cloak, his wizard's cloak. So now we can increase the shadow within the ear a little bit more. All the way down. So now going back to the smudging tool, I'm just pushing that. Now these are quite small. I put these in. This is a pen holder, a Josephine Gillot mapping pen, and rather than putting the nib in, I put these in because it means I can use it more like a pencil, because they are only about so long when they're brand new. So if you're wondering what I'm using, that's just a dip pen and ink pen holder, Josephine Gillot, and you'll find those online and in your local art store as well. And these are 3/8 of an inch, I think, something, or a quarter of an inch it might be. But you can get smudging sticks in all different sizes, but I have these because they fit in these pencil holders and give me a little bit more versatility. So now we've really pushed that down. I'm going to really crisp up highlight on the edge of his ear, coming right the way down. There you go, and that's just pulled that up quite nicely. So I'm now going to sharpen the 4B pencil. Oops, that's broken. Try that again. And that can happen with a soft pencil. If you drop it, you can actually break it, or they could be that soft that you press on, like I just did, and you'll snap it straight away anyway. So just be careful when that happens. So now I'm really pushing the darks up, but here, where his parting is, I need to increase the dark where that goes right up his hairline, and the same coming down here. There's a dark passage amongst his hair there, and another one there, and bringing the dark round above his eye. Now done that, I'm now going to just smudge that out a little bit, and all the lines I'm gently rubbing over so you can still see the line, but again it's pushing pencil over them so that you haven't got the strong highlight as you have there. It means you've got the paper covered and it's not working against you in tone in other areas. So you see, we need to just darken that down a little bit, and then go back in once more gently with the putty rubber to pull those up that you've just smoothed out, but these slightly right on the top, you've got this line of light going up over the top of his hair. There you go, you can see that's really helping his hair to have form and body. So now, right on the top, going over it, and I'm just dabbing, because you've got the pencil lines that you've put in, that helps show underneath the form and direction of the hairlines. So again, these highlights are just being pulled up after you've smoothed and smudged some around. So again now, we're going to fill in a lot of area quickly with dark. And this is on Ron's cloak. And this we really can do quickly. So coming down, following the line of his collar. And this is something that you can do very loosely and impressionistically if you want. Or again, you can go very, very slow and fill it in very carefully. Let's just use lots of pencil. And sometimes you can have, for large areas like this, you can have multiple pencils of the same grade and have them all pre-sharpened. But I like you to actually hear the pencil sharpener going, and the fact that I do stop to sharpen my pencils. So I hope that's helpful to you, that you're doing this in a kind of real world way. But if you knew that you got a lot of area to cover, could have a number of pencils ready to go, and that way you just haven't got to keep stopping to sharpen. But some kits, you can get kits with all the different grades of pencils in. So I'm pressing on lighter here. Where the highlights are on his cloak, where that comes round. But as I was saying, you know, you can get pencil kits and they may only have one of each grade in. But I know that the art stores I go to, that they do have pots of pencils, like racks of pencils, so you can buy multiples of a certain grade. So here we've got a very dark shadow underneath this right part of his collar. So I'm doing that very dark and black. And again, here we've got a dark shadow underneath this side. And then not so dark in between, and especially on these parts we've got a very dark. I'm going to be careful here. And then a bit of a mid-tone. Coming down. A little bit darker on that one. Again, I am just going to use the smudging tool because it will push the pencil into the paper and kind of fill the gaps in for you. Again, lightly pressing on dark in that little V section, right up to the edge. There we have that side of Ron's top done. Again, down by side of his collar. You can use the smudging stick as you would a pencil, but it's just pushing the tone of the pencil around, giving you shape and form. So you can see there, I'm just, the more I press on, the darker line I get. And that's something with cloth, that the softness that's created, you get that kind of softness that is in fabric. So think about that, the marks that you make to actually replicate the material. Again, follow the flow of the material. So here we've got a bit of a shadow line, but then we've got a strong highlight on that corner and the same on those corners, and then a little bit in between there. But then where the seam is here, we've got a stronger highlight completely, and the same going up. And if you just smudge back in over, that gives you a little bit more tonal variation, pushing that around. Now, underneath his shirt, it is a lot darker. And down the side of his tie, we've got a lot of darker tone. Now I'm probably going to have to come into this with a 2B pencil, maybe even the 4B. Just going to sharpen the 4B again. Now, the edge of his collar, you've got that darker shadow, and the same. So now I'm using the paper to stop my hand from smudging all over his face. So we've got the shadow coming down his neck, right along the top of his collar. This is where it's going to be darkest. then his tie underneath, coming down the edge, we can really darken that. And then on this side of his right collar, you've got a very dark, deep shadow coming down by the side of his tie, and then you've got these folds of his shirt. And I'm just whacking these lines in quite quickly, right down the side of his tie. Now, I've got a deep shadow in the where his tie is kind of folded up there on his Gryffindor house tie, going up to where the knot is, and down the left hand side of the tie. And we can push that shadow that down that side. And then we've got the darker band, the burgundy, coming over it, and then you've got quite a deep shadow there. You've got a lighter shadow caused by his collar. Actually on his tie, and then on the burgundy you've got slightly darker again. And then his tie itself is causing a shadow down onto his shirt underneath there. Again, the same with the top. So you can see you've just got very quickly all of those tones down. I'm just pushing the pencil around using the smudging tool. And it works well with the fabric because fabric tends to be soft. It's only when we put metallic things on and glitter and sparkles that you have to worry about adding extra. If somebody's got like a badge or an amulet or something pinned onto their, like so it would be a prefect's badge, then you'd have to think about putting highlights in and stronger lines. But with fabric you can smudge the edges out and it's not so critical. Now again, with all the pencil that's actually on your smudging tool, you can create the lines on his collar and the deeper tone. You've got that highlight there, so leave the paper. And kind of follow the direction of the kind of creases in his shirt collar. Pick up some dark off the the black area and push that on where you've got that kind of fold going down. So I'm going to pick up my 2B pencil. I'm now going to give some delineation to the edge of his shirt collar, and it's like the kind of sewn little seam inside where the fabric's folded over itself. You've got these little squiggles where you can see there's a slightly darker tone. So I'm doing the same there, putting that darkened tone where it goes close to his neck, and then coming down the collar. And going up. You can see how his collar, there's still this highlight here that's showing, but we've pushed the pencil around to create that darker tone. Now again, we've got the the fabric kind of creases. We can allow that highlight to really stand out. So I'm now going to really just pick that up. And then on the corner of his collar here, we can pick up those highlights. And again, just dab gently in. And it just gives that little bit extra tonal variation. So that's the shadow on his collar. Looking quite good on that side. So again, on this side now we've got a little bit of shade going up there. We've got where the sewn lines are again. So again, I'm going to use the 2B pencil just to indicate those sewn lines coming down. And then the dark underneath his neck, and then where the button is, we can increase that. So now where the button is at the top of his collar, we can just touch a little highlight there, coming down the edge of his collar where the sewn line is inside the collar, and then right up the edge, sewn line there, and there you've got a nice bright collar with Ron's tie. Now what I'm going to use now is the 2B pencil. In fact, no, I'm going to use the 4B. I'm going to sharpen it up. Drop my paper again. Ooh, there we go. So I'm going to use the 4B pencil because it is the darkest. Now, because we've got all of this dark in, you can see there's a lot of lovely form. But the darks are not dark enough in his mouth. So right on this side, we can increase that carefully. So the crease in between his mouth is very dark. But then on his actual lips, doesn't need to be as black as the crease that goes right the way across. But you can see that's really pulled Ron's lips up very quickly. Remember, 4B is very soft and you can make it dark very, very quickly. But for the very dark areas, so here with his nostril, really darkening that down. Same on this side. Now I'm going to increase in his pupils. So that's the main dark. So I've got one much darker part on the side of this nostril. That needs to be much darker. Going up. But now we can increase the others. I'm going to use the 2B because you've got a little bit more control. And we can increase the shadows that need to, and you'll match up everything. So the shadow coming down under his nose. You increase the darks and it just matches everything up with the darks in his hair and the midtones in his hair. So the light's coming from this direction, so all down the side of his nose you can see here is the darkest part, and then down the side of his nose we can increase that a little bit, and then coming out the side of his eye right into that corner, and then the fold over the top of his eyelid, we can increase that, and that comes right the way down. Again, over his tear duct. Edge of his iris. You can see already the darkness that we've increased down the side of his nose has given a good bit more form. Do the same. It's a lot brighter on this side, so we don't want to increase it too much on that side. But all the shadow now is down here, so we've got his laughter line going down his cheek from his nose to the side of his mouth. We can increase that a little bit. And then we've got all the shadow down this side coming underneath his eye. We can increase that coming round over the top. So I'm using the side of the pencil but not pressing on too hard, and you can just carefully and gently build up the intensity of the dark. So I'm coming down on his cheek. We need to follow the curve of that light. The crease caused by his down his cheek from his laughter line around the side of his mouth. Underneath his chin, bottom lip, we can pull that out. All this part coming down to his chin needs to be darker. Going up. It's much darker down this kind of line here. This is where the darkest part of the shadow is. Right down the side of his face, not down here by his ear. It's lighter, it's a bit lighter there, and down by his neck here we need to increase it there. We can follow the line of his chin and his jawbone. Again, you can just use cross hatching and you can leave it, or you could smudge it with your smudging tool or a brush or kitchen towel. So I'm going up to his neck, and then that can be increased a little bit coming down from his hairline. That's looking pretty good. So now need to increase that on his nose still, and again you can keep going as long as you want. Again, this has been about just over 2 hours. And a full, highly detailed portrait that I do can be 1 to 2 days. So it's just down to the amount of time you want to spend on your portrait. So now, just increasing that line coming down underneath, it's creating like his eye socket shape. Dark shadow off the top of his lip going inside there. That can be darker. Got that kind of line coming down the side of his chin, but we can make that a little bit darker coming over. Again, my smudging tool is very, very dark, so I'm just wiping it clean. But I'm just using it again now to just smooth out what I've just put down. But because I'm going over that, I wouldn't put it here because it's so dark, it will cause a lot of problems. but by smudging over the dark areas that you've just added that extra pencil to, it will cause the transitions to fade together. So coming up here, and you can just push the pencil over where you've actually drawn, and you smooth out those edges, and it gives you a really good natural transition. So there is a bit of a highlight shadow coming down off his cheek that makes that highlight there stand out a little bit more. I'm just darkening that down a little bit. Now we've got a highlight right on this corner, so I'm just pushing the pencil around with the smudging tool to allow that to show and stay a little bit brighter, rather than going in with the rubber to clean it out. So smoothing that down around the edge of his cheek. Now here, what I will do, I'm just smudging where he's got that little dimple, and then you come back in and you just dab on the side, and you can see straight away he's got that highlight because you've just pulled off a little bit of pencil. Smoothing his cheek, and these are just last little details. I'm just pushing round, going back to the 4B, because this is down the side of his jaw and to his chin is much darker. So I'm really darkening that down now, and again underneath his nose, and in that corner of his eye. And it's just giving his shape to his parts of his face. The darker shadow is creating more shape and form. And that's what happens with the way the light, when it's directional and there's light coming from this side as well, from both sides, you get this darker, rather than it being all dark down this side, you get this darker kind of line up the centre with a bit of a highlighted bit around the side. So we can darken down Ron's nose. And down on his chin. And I've just smudged over a little bit. Smudge that with my finger. But there, I'm quite happy with that. I hope you are. There's Ron Weasley. I hope you've enjoyed that tutorial, just seeing that in real time, and I hope you've had fun and you've learned some more techniques, and we'll come back with another portrait and more Harry Potter characters. But thank you very much. Please do like and subscribe, and there will be more portrait tutorials soon. Take care, have fun with your art. Ta-da.